My name is Albert Tembingosi Modi. I am the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor for the College of Agriculture, Engineering and Science. Food security is a global challenge, but we in Africa are particularly concerned. Our university has been aware of this challenge for many years, and that led to us establishing a Center for Food Security in the School of Agricultural, Earth and Environmental Sciences. Our college consequently has decided to create platforms for collaboration among food producers or people who are working in the food production sector, as well as people who are dealing with challenges such as the shortage of water, as well as the management of food production.
We work with gardens, and we work obviously with orchards, and we are particularly interested in our research and trying to find solutions for growing crops under certain environmental conditions, how to make them more resistant to certain environmental conditions, and why are they more resistant to environmental conditions. Horticulture means the culture of the garden. So initially horticulture, when it started out, was just something that people were growing crops in their backyard basically, and then it got more and more bigger, and we had higher yields and greater areas that we planted in. So from a food security perspective, we should go back to that initial garden concept and be able to teach people maybe to grow things in the land that surrounds them and start to grow crops, start to grow tomatoes, cabbages and so on and so forth, things that are relatively easily grown on a small scale to just substitute their availability of food to make them more food secure.
Within our research group, we've got a huge passion for neglected, underutilized and indigenous crops, or what some would call traditional crops or orphan crops or forgotten crops. Basically, farmers struggle with a range of issues, which start from basic agronomy, cultivar selection of planting dates, weeding, fertilization, and our research touches on a lot of those things. Our research also has a strong focus on sustainable agriculture and fitting crops into rural cropping systems that are resilient, that are adapted to climate change, that have low water use, tolerance to several abiotic and biotic stresses. So we are trying to sort of improve the resilience of rural cropping systems and also diversify them, taking them away from monocropping systems to multi-crop systems that feature cereals and legumes as well as indigenous leafy vegetables. So that also links, like I was saying, that we look at the entire value chain. So our research then links what the farmers are growing in the field to what they're actually consuming in their household, trying to address their nutritional status as well.
The center was originally conceived somewhere in the 1990s when it became apparent that food security was going to be a long-term challenge facing the African continent, particularly the subcontinent, where we had seen declining food production and increasing food prices. We started with an academic program, really, that provided professional training for people from all over Africa, primarily Southern Africa, but all over Africa, to learn the professional skills related to issues in food security. It is very common that within a region, within a country, but more importantly within individual households within a country, you might find food insecurity. It's even possible for a household to be food secure, but to find that within it, individual members of that household are not food secure.
The operational definition of food security is about making food available, accessible, and utilized optimally by the target communities or population groups, and that must be sustained. So there should be stability of those three pillars that I'm talking about. So when you look at agriculture and food security, we look at agriculture, food production, going down a value chain from production downstream to the consumer. We mainly operate downstream. We are not involved mainly in production, although we advocate for what should be produced in terms of its nutritional value. So there's some food processing, food preservation, research, and also advocates on how to combine the different foods into a diet that is optimal for the communities.
The most important philosophy in our research is that to develop a well-functioning, integrated agro-technology combining the pre-harvest practices, production practices, with good post-harvest management systems and the technology. When it comes to the African continent, post-harvest technology research is still at its really infant stage. The African continent is experiencing quite huge post-harvest losses, food losses and waste today. That could have been actually minimized. Then our research is really focusing much on technology development that can be scaled up at different levels.
Food security is one of those greatest human condition challenges that was there a long time ago. It's still here today. And if we don't address it from a systematic point of view, it will be there in the future when our children are existing as adults. One of the exciting and most important issues that I think I'd like to discuss on why researchers in the broadness of the dimensions of food security, those that are working in the availability dimension in production sciences, the production, plant production, animal production, all those are critical components of food security because this is where the food is produced. So issues of how the food is produced, is it going to be sustainable in the future, the way in which we're producing food now?
Farmer Support Group is a unit within the School of Agriculture, Earth and Environmental Sciences. Its work is to bring the rural communities closer to the work that the university does. It is looking at how the challenges that smallholder farmers face can be addressed. We find that farmers are more able to question some of the technologies in their appropriateness, but they are also able to take what really works, what effectively works in their own conditions. We hope that going forward, that more scientists will have experiments that are done but are also informed by the circumstances that are on the ground.
The goal is to breed using conventional breeding to produce better varieties that are better adapted to the conditions that exist. So about 70% of the projects have been about reducing diseases or insects, and then others have been about developing drought tolerance in crops like maize. So we've found fungi that attack and feed on these pests, and we've shown that we can get control of at least 90%, and that can increase the food supply to the farmers from 50% of what they harvest all the way up to 90% of what they harvest. So it's an 80% increase of food availability just by controlling the weevils. So my take on it is the quickest way of doubling the food in Africa is not to grow any more food. It's just to kill the insects that eat half the food that we grow. Why bother with growing more if you can just preserve the food that you've got?
We use Ukalinga quite widely for animal research, and obviously animal production being a very important part of food security. So a lot of our poultry research focuses on commercial production, improving efficiencies and trying to utilize raw materials efficiently and trying to get very efficient production, because that just helps with producers being able to market birds. And then a lot of our livestock research is focusing on animals being able to adapt to changing climates. I think on a sort of twofold level, looking at commercial production can enhance food security in the way of producing jobs for people to give them a stable income. On a sort of South African economy basis to improve production, and then down to sort of more livelihoods, sustainable livelihoods, where people can grow animals and produce their own meat. We focus quite strongly on obviously the scientific theoretical part of animal science, and then enforcing that with practical sessions, and so the farm is a vital component of that. And students really benefit from being involved with projects such as the Steers project, where they get first-hand experience of feedlotting cattle, or actually having a broiler cycle where they grow out birds, to be involved in all the processes that take place in that cycle, so that when they're in the job market they have a good understanding of what actually happens practically.